All right, 30 seconds done. I think we're ready for the last session of the day, and it's gonna be amazing. The name of this session is Mother's Loom Lodge. Isn't that befitting for Mother's Day? Mother's Loom Lodge, and don't we know it? And we are closing this festival, like we said, with a very frank conversation about how maternal figures materialize in fiction and life and the gray areas between truth and reverence. And I'm gonna introduce our panel because they are absolutely amazing. We have Ugandan poet and playwright who's based in London, Dr. Nick Makokha, whose work explores fatherhood, and he was recently shortlisted for the 2025 T.S. Eliot Prize. Dr. Nick Makokha, come to the stage, please. We've also got the award-winning Chilean writer and scholar Lina Meruane, who has written a fiery essay that warns of the dangers of conservative ecofeminist ideals. Okay, come to the stage, Lina. And last but not least, on the panel, we have got the 2024 OCM Bocas Prize for Caribbean Literature winner and poet Safiya Sinclair, whose memoir... Thanks. Safiya Sinclair, whose memoir, How to Save Babylon, chronicles her mother's strength and sacrifices. Welcome to the stage, Safiya. They are going to be moderated by the very lovely Lily Bekele-Piper. Welcome to the stage as well. A round of applause for our panel. Mother's Loom Lodge. Welcome, Lily. Have a fantastic session.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. You know, we have to channel that inner energy, the Sunday night energy of this beautiful festival. Let me have the privilege of just thanking our hosts this evening, to Wanjira, Washiku, to Shiro, to the entire Book Bunk team. Hongera Sana for this incredible gathering that you have put together. We see your love and your intention and your care of every single writer, author, thinker, creative artist that you've pulled together. So what a beautiful festival, hasn't it been? It's been really, truly extraordinary. And congratulations on 5 years of the Nairobi Lit Fest. To many, many, many more. Good evening, my name is Lily, and I have the distinct honor of sitting among some incredible scholars and writers and teachers. I love that each one of you are also professors and teachers and instructing the next generation about really important themes of gender, of woman and manhood, of personhood, of the tensions that we live in when we come in family units. And on this Mother's Day, as we jump into this conversation, I thought it was interesting just to give us a little context for even the holiday, so to speak, of Mother's Day, which I think many would say is a capitalist movement at this point in time. But this morning I just looked to see the history of it. And what started off as one woman's effort to honor her personal mother, eventually in the late 1800s turned into an opportunity to really shift political power. During the season of the immense loss of the 1870s, the losses of the Civil War in the United States and the Franco-Prussian War, there was a writer and reformer, Julia Ward Howe, who changed kind of where the apostrophe sit instead of Mother's Day, the plural Mother's Day, to really emphasize the role of women in politics and to try and bring attention to that. And I think today's panel will have a chance to explore whether or not the work of many other women, men, writers, thinkers who have tried to move the needle on how we frame and think about our identity in this role and other roles, how that shows up. So thank you again to our panelists, and let's just jump right in. I'll start off with a question that any of you could take, and maybe each of you could speak to it, actually. Each of you write about against simplification, against oversimplifying our identities, wherever they may show up in our profession and our personal life. So I'd like to ask you, why do you think literature, uniquely, whether it's poetry, whether it's memoir, whatever genre we're in, why is literature uniquely capable of telling the truth about the contradictions that we live in, that they are not as simple as we seem? Why is the literature that conduit for each of you? Dr.
Me?
Nick? Sure, I'd love for each of you to speak to that.
Straight in, all right. I think, well, I believe personally, I was just talking to Safiya before. I'm a poet to the core. She was saying the same thing, and I believe that language is our technology. It's not computers or cars or spaceships, the way that we have a privilege over other animals and that we can communicate through this thing called language. And it does more than just communicating objects, what they do. It communicates the function of the spirit, the function of the mind. It communicates time, so we can go into the past. It sends us into the future. It draws out my world into your world and your world into my world. It also allows for chaos. So that's what language can do, and that's just not even a microcosm of what's possible. I'll give some more to my panelists to add to that. Yeah.
So, well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation to this wonderful festival. I've been mesmerized by each and every panel that I've listened to, and it's been a gift. So thank you so much for that. So trying to address the question that you had for us, I was thinking a lot about what language does and what literature does in times of contradiction and so many mixed messages that we're getting and how we deal with that. And I think that the way in which I address contradiction in literature is by giving myself time, which we often don't have in our daily lives, by giving ideas space, and also depth. So these three things have become so vital for me and have made my literary practice meaningful, because in my daily life, I don't have any of these three things. But when I sit down, I discover what I think, what I feel. I think against the grain. I think against myself even, to dig deeper into all these things that are happening so quickly. So literature, I didn't know this when I was starting to write, but literature has allowed me to do this both in the essayistic form, but also, which is usually very creative and fiery, as my presenter, the previous presenter said, and I love that for myself. But also in the less direct, more sinuous way that novels and short stories and sometimes poems or plays allow us to. So there's always like a question that is hanging there that gets addressed in a specific genre, but it is addressed with time, space, and depth.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like they both said it so well. I also want to say hi to everyone. I'm very happy to be here. It's my first time in Kenya. And I mean, how did I get here? How am I here with you all in Nairobi? It's because of literature. It's because of language and the possibilities that it creates. And I really, truly believe that. I love the theme of the panel today about mothers. Because, if you've read my book, my mother has had such lasting impact on my life through books, through literature, which she gifted to me when I was a young girl. I think because she also, when she was a young girl, saw the possibilities and the expansiveness of literature and what it gave to her. And so she then gifted it to me. And so a large part of why I'm a writer is because I have that love of language, but that love of language was given to me by my mother, who loved poetry, and she would have me and my siblings memorize and recite poems. And she is the person who handed me my first collection of poems when I was having a particularly difficult moment in my young life. And she said, I think poetry will help you. And she was right. It did help me. It helped me kind of deal with the pains of adolescence, of trying to figure out who I was as a young woman, of finding my voice, of figuring out what I wanted to say, and that eventually that what I did want to say had importance, that my voice mattered. And that was given to me by literature and by extension, my mother.
It's really beautiful to hear all of you who have written so deeply and significantly over the years somehow simplify your responses, whether language now becomes science, becomes time, it becomes medicine almost, hearing you say it. So I'd love to just now turn to each one of your specific works and talk about how that manifests. So Nick, let me start with you, with the theme in mind, that mothers loom large. You write in your poetry about inheritance, about migration. Your story is incredibly moving, and I think it's one that our audience here that represents so many of the diaspora, many Kenyans, but also other Pan-Africans here can relate to. So I want to know, how has your experience with this role of fatherhood, masculinity, has it evolved between your experience as a young boy and all that you went through, and now, where, if I can project a bit on you, maybe you have a more typical traditional life, that your story now is rooted in a way that it maybe wasn't in your earlier years when you faced political crises. So I wonder if you could talk about your writing then and your writing now, and how your identity as a father fits in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think in many ways, my mom says there was a time she used to read on the news here, and when she was reading the bulletin, I think she was pregnant with me, and I kicked. And she says, when I kicked, she said, I know this one's going to be a writer. She only ever told me that, but she didn't tell me that like any time in my life. This was after I'd abandoned wanting to be a doctor, abandoned wanting to work in the bank. I felt like I was a disappointment to her. Then one time she came to see me read, and then she was like, let me tell you this story. And I was like, you've been holding that one in the bag for that long? But yeah, but also at the same time, I have to thank my mother in the sense that, similarly to Safiya, in that my mom gave me the love of language. She read to me constantly. So reading wasn't something I avoided. Reading was something I ran to or assumed was normal. And I think that is a gift, whether it's your father or your mother. But in my case, it was my mother, because I lived mostly with my mother. My father and mother were not together. But more importantly than that, my mother, as much as sometimes she gets on my nerves, and that's what mothers do, she saved my life. Because, as you know, we had to leave Uganda, and when we did, it was her courage to pull me out of a situation. And I think that also triggered the poet in me, because I knew 4 languages that I spoke, of which I'm only now speaking 1. I know a little bit of Swahili, which makes 1.5, and then Samir and Luganda. But because I didn't speak them, it seemed like poetry was able to absorb those other identities. And part of the reason, even in this, particularly this new collection, The New Carthaginians, one of the questions that was in the back of my mind, or the epiphany I had, I wonder if I would have been a poet if I didn't leave my country. Because I needed language gives you a space, particularly poetry, and I think you were speaking to that, Safiya. It gives you a space to express your full identity in many ways, even through other people's voices. So, sometimes when I give gratitude, I have to thank my mother for that, because it gave me a space. So she gave me also a story to tell. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. I think hearing your mother as a through line from your early days to your days now, and then at a critical junction, helps lead you to maybe a path that maybe you wouldn't have found otherwise. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I would have had a safer route. I reckon if I stayed in East Africa, I probably would have played it some kind of safe. But because you become this other identity, you become this black body. Because here I'm just a man or a boy when I was younger. But as soon as I entered into the UK, I became a black man, which comes with all its connotations of who they think we are: refugees, asylum seekers, all these notions of who we are. So I think language gave me this space to be my real self, as opposed to this superimposed version of who they thought I was.
I said to our panelists earlier that my only fear tonight is that we're not going to have enough time, because each one of them have such extraordinary contributions to give us this evening. And Nick is the founder of the Obsidian Foundation, which specifically centers Black poetry. And one of my questions for you later is why that was necessary. And just hearing you talk about becoming a Black man when you left Uganda is such an important idea, I think, for us to sit with longer. So we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Safiya, I wanted to just build on what Nick was talking about this importance of his mother giving him a bit of a compass at a time where he was thinking about identity and profession and how that looks like. Your mother is so central to your story, but you also there. You're very present. We see you. We hear your voice. We experience your emotions as we read How to Say Babylon. But I'm curious, did you ever think about writing a book of fiction to allow yourself more place to play with who she was or who you were, as opposed to a memoir, which kind of makes you beholden to truth and facts and a timeline? Did you wrestle with kind of what genre would serve this story best?
No.
All right, next question. Thank you.
No, I mean, I like truth.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer, yeah.
I like truth. I like facts. I also, one of the things that I came to realize is that telling my story and claiming it as mine, as my life, was the most crucial thing. Because it was important to anybody who's ever grown up in a space where they felt voiceless or they felt oppressed or they felt that parts of themselves or their identities were being stifled. I meet so many young girls now who say, I grew up in the same way or I'm going through the same thing. And that's why for me it was important to tell the story from, like this is my story. It happened to me and now I'm okay. On the other side of it, you too can come through it and survive, and you too will be okay, and that your words have power, and what you have to say is important. So for me, no, fiction was never a part of it. Yeah.
It's a vulnerable choice, to write your life story and put it on a page, and I'm going to come back to a little bit more digging into that.
I mean, they had a lawyer read the whole thing. And, the lawyer was like, is your father going to sue you?
Yeah.
And I was like, Rasta don't believe in suing, so
we're good.
I'm okay.
So you're good.
I'm all right.
So far, so good.
I'm okay. Yes.
May it stay so.
That's Babylon. The law, that's Babylon. Yes.
Lina, I want to come to you and talk a little bit about language. Part of what this festival is focusing on is the South-to-South connection. And your story, your roots are in multiple places, if that's fair to say. And you write deeply about your Palestinian heritage. You write, of course, in Spanish as your primary conduit for your stories. So I'm curious, when you are in the room with different audiences, today's audience is wildly diverse, even though we're here in Nairobi with many people from here. We have a very diverse audience. I'm curious, how does your choice of language or your choice of theme, and let's keep it to the motherhood theme maybe, in particular your essay against children, Contra Hijos, how has that fallen with Palestinian audiences? How has that been received by Chilean audiences? You're now teaching in the United States, if I'm not wrong. Yes, so how do maybe your United States audience members, how do they receive your messages, particularly around motherhood? Have you felt a difference?
So yeah, it's a great question. I first would like to say that it's not only mothers, it's also grandmothers, because there's a lineage there. So I have a very strong lineage on my mother's side. I remember what made me a feminist, speaking of mothers, was seeing my grandmother's picture of graduating from law school, which she attended on and off because in the middle my mother was born, and in the middle my grandmother divorced, which was already a huge layer of difficulties that she experienced. And I saw this picture, and it was like 100 men in suit standing, and 2 women, sort of very little, they looked so little, sitting in 2 chairs with their elegant dress. And I thought, oh, this is what it was like. How much do we owe to other women who have fought so hard for us to have an education and succeed in it, succeed in our dreams. And so then I also realized how much my mother had struggled, because also in her time, there was a quota for women. So you would have 90 men and 10 women attending class in law school, in medicine, and my mother became a doctor. So I had that very, very strong model coming from my mother's side, which is not my father's side, which is the Palestinian side. But I have to say that my grandmother on the Palestinian side had wanted to study and was never able to. Her time was difficult, her family was more difficult. So she made very sure that my aunts and my father went to university. And so I think that is something that has been super important in my life. And I think that I have valued teaching precisely because I value so much the possibility and the actuality of education. So my mother gave me another gift, which was very important. She once told me when I was like 15, she said, you know, motherhood is not easy. So if you don't fall in love with the idea of motherhood, don't do it. And I thought, great, because I didn't want to be a mother. So this is where I think things started for me. I kind of knew that I was not going to become a mother. That was not my dream. And one thing is to have a talent, and the other thing is to be obliged to pursue that talent, meaning becoming a mother. So this is something that was very dear to me as I don't have that wish. It's not in me to be that. But I did feel a lot of pressure growing up. And that's why I wrote my diatribe against children, which I'm not really against children. But I am, it's an essay that explores and thinks through what children have become today in our capitalist societies. And I also wanted to share one more thing, speaking of violence and the possibility of violence. The moment I started writing that book was when 20 years after I graduated from university, and I was already a writer, I got through Facebook a message from a dear friend who had wanted to be my boyfriend, but didn't, because I decided not to go that path. And so he sent me a message. We had been very good friends, just I didn't want to, I didn't fall in love with him. So he sent me a message after these 20 years, and he actually became a father very soon in his life. Not with me, obviously, with the next girl. And I knew that he had actually married this woman and had more children. So when he showed up on Facebook, I said, oh, so lovely to hear from you. And how are you doing? How has your life been? And he said, I am such a happy father. Every time I come back from work, my children run to me. And this is the finest moment of my day. And I was so happy to hear that. And then he said, so what about you? Did you have children, or are you going to be like American women who have children when they should be grandmothers? That was the end of the conversation. I took that very seriously because I was angry, but then I thought, why is it so important for him to show up and say that? Why is it so important to insult me in that way, right? Through me not having children, because he knew I hadn't had. We were part of a community. So I thought, oh, this is an interesting question. It still bothers a few people that some women are choosing not to have children. Why is that? And that's how I started thinking, and that's why I wrote that book.
I'm assuming this person is Chilean?
Of course.
Okay. So, well, but my question was going to be, I wonder if the response would have been different.
Your question was
otherwise.
larger, but I couldn't address everything you asked.
We need to extend this session till tomorrow, if that's okay with everyone. I wonder if some of us here may say that might have been a similar response that they would have gotten from a Kenyan partner or an Ethiopian partner or a Jamaican partner, I don't know, or Ugandan partner. Maybe there's always nuance. None of us are monolith. Just wanted to let that pass. I want to sit with that a little bit longer, though, because you used the word offense, if I'm not wrong. Like, why did that offend him? Why did my personal point of view offend him? when all of you are writing, there are important notions you're pointing out in each of your cultures, your respective cultures. Lina, you've asked us to examine, are children being tokenized? Are women's bodies simply a means of political movement? Are they autonomous in any way? Safiya, you've pointed to an entire, faith community to say, what can they give us and how could they change? And are they serving as they intend to serve? Is there something there that could possibly be better or different, for families, for girls, for women? Nick, you point to points in your story where there were gaps, and I think to me, when I read your poetry in particular, you seem to be speaking to men to say these are ways that we can exist differently and even better. So when you're writing, there's always the personal process. You're writing, there's a page or a tablet or a laptop, and then there's this. There's the faces of the people who have read your work and who have followed your work and who are internalizing your work in different ways. I often ask writers, who are you writing for? When you're writing that difficult passage about the role of children or women's bodies, when you're writing about your experience in a faith community that caused you, is it fair to say, harm, Safiya, that there was things that you had to overcome within that community to allow you to be here today? Nick, there are your own obstacles you've had to face. Who are you writing for? And then what does it feel now to sit with those who have read your work and who have internalized it and make the words now live outside of you, live in a space of dialogue and community? Is that clear at all?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I just want to have coffee with them individually, but we've invited all of you to come along with us. So, Nick, you want to start?
Okay, thank you. I think when I write for different, I guess, audiences, as you're calling them, at different times. So I realize, I said this the other day, I realize I'm a spiritual being. So on some level, I'm always talking to God. And Lee Young Lee, it's one of my favorite books, I always read it before I start anything, has a book called Breaking the Alabaster Jar, where he says, you should write as if God is in the other room, because then you say what you really want to say. You can't lie to God, if that makes sense. So that's not that I do that intentionally, but that's one audience that's always there. I'm always talking to God, and on some level, I'm always talking to myself. I don't know if that makes sense, but it makes sense to me. And then the other thing is, I have to write a story that I would want to hear. So if it doesn't move me, I'm just using words. Like you have those people, they just keep talking and talking. It's very easy to be that as a writer, because this is as much as it's hard to write, it is a privilege also to write. So in that privilege, I have to write something that moves me. I realize now that I'm getting older, on some level, the other thing you realize is that, sometimes we're telling stories that are not just our stories, they're somebody else's story. So if we keep silent, then the story doesn't get released. So sometimes you think, well, because sometimes you don't want to write what you're having to write about. It. Like the memoir is a difficult memoir that you wrote, but to put it out there is something. And so a lot of things I write, I don't go, oh, I'd love to write about the Idi Amin dictatorship. I can't wait to get this one out. I'm scared of it, but at the same time, I'm aware that I'm telling a story that doesn't just belong to me. I'll pass it on because I'm taking all the good bits. So
let me just take it from there.
Yeah.
It's interesting how one thinks that the story only matters to us.
Yeah.
And we want to share it. So I did write because I did want to sort of address something that had bothered me and stayed with me over a long time. And all these things that I had seen through my grandmothers and my mom, etc. But I really honestly believed that the question of motherhood or not being a mother only mattered to me. And so I wrote my short diatribe. And in the first presentation in Mexico, because I published it first in Mexico, there were so many people. I've never had so many people come to the launch of a book of mine. And I was like, wow, that's very strange. And the questions were very engaged, which was also a surprise to me. Like it felt like people were feeling with me and wanting to share a lot of different things related to motherhood and childhood. And then I had the idea to present this in Santiago, in Chile, and the line was like around the block. And that also surprised me. And then I realized that sometimes we think that we are struggling with an idea and then we need to write about it. And it turns out that so many more people have struggled with the same idea. So it's not that I think about a particular audience when I write. Same thing happened with my Palestinian book. That then people would say like, oh, you wrote ahead of time. I was like, well, this really mattered to me, and this violence in Palestine has been occurring for such a long time. But you don't really know where your book is going to go and how it's going to resonate with so many other people, which is really lovely because it's also opening up so many conversations that I've been able to open up during the years, and I've learned so much from the audiences. Even more than from the critics who have a more, nasty thing to them. They have an agenda, exactly. But people come up and share stories as well. So you also sometimes feel that you have facilitated a thought, a reflection, and some more storytelling.
Yeah, that makes me think of that James Baldwin quote where he says, you think that your experiences of struggle and pain is singular to you, and then you read. And then you read it and you see, that this is a universal thing. And again, this goes back to your first question of what can literature give us? It's that ability to access this kind of communal experience with each other. But to your question of an audience, I honestly don't ever really think of an audience. The simplest answer for me, if we're talking about the memoir in particular, is that I wrote the book for my 12-year-old self, for that young girl who really felt out of place, who felt this really hard sense of unbelonging, who questioned whether there was any space in the world for her, whether there was a future for her, who questioned what would her future look like, what would womanhood look like for her, who had so much doubt, who had so much pain. I write for her because I wouldn't be here if it weren't for her belief in herself. And the way that poetry gave me an access to making sense of my experiences, helping me to find a space of belonging, of being able to build a home for myself on the page and a voice for myself on the page. So really everything that I write is for her. Yeah.
That's a dope answer. I like that one.
Beautiful. And I hope we will have time to hear from our audience. I'm watching this clicker, but I'm hoping we'll have time to have questions because some of what each one of you have said has spoken to, I think, so many of the conversations I've been hearing people have this weekend, and this idea of being seen and the responsibility you have to a story, to an idea, and to share it. Safiya, I want to talk with you a little bit about the Rastafarianism in your book and your mother's role in that. She was, in many ways, your protector. That's how I read it. But at the same time, she also had limits placed on her own freedom. And Rastafarianism itself was born out of resistance. That this practice of faith and community was born out of resistance. I'm curious to know, as a writer who has told your life story and allowed all of us to experience it, if there were times that you felt in particular, how did you protect either yourself or your engagement with the external voices who may want to take your book as an example of, aha, we told you. You see, this is extremist behavior, or this is an example of what is wrong with this community or with Jamaica or with this practice of faith. Because we've seen it happen in other ways. We've seen Black people tell their stories of liberation or family, of struggle, and it's been weaponized against them as examples of failure or examples of incompetence and any number of things that may be put upon us. And so I'm just curious, you let us have a very bird's eye view of what your life was like. And yet, I'm curious how you have navigated that as a writer, of not letting other people take your story and use it in unintended ways.
I mean, do I seem like someone who would let someone take my story and use it in unintended ways?
Well, we talked about those critics,
So it's not Rastafarianism, it's Rastafari, because Rasta don't believe in ism and schism. So the ism is a part of like an imperial language that they reject. So for me, it was really important to write about growing up as a young girl in Rastafari with as truthful as I could, and also as nuanced as I could. And I hope that the takeaway that everyone has, that they see that nuance, right? That, as you say, Rastafari was born as a liberation movement. It was born as an anti-colonial movement in colonial Jamaica. And so it was born from a place of wanting to, give the black people in Jamaica a sense of independence, a sense of their own freedoms, of creating their own language and their own kind of culture that was distinctly anti-colonial. And so for me, those things are very important and are things that I still carry with me, that have been taught to me as someone who grew up Rastafari. And we can say that and say, and also, it was a liberation movement, an anti-colonial movement, but it was also a little bit, I think, didn't create a space for women to also have their own sense of, a full sense of themselves and their freedoms, and their own independence. I also want to point out that this is not unique to Rastafari, right? Like the patriarchy, as you were just saying, and as you were kind of saying, it's like one of the few universal things we have in the world is the toxicity of the patriarchy throughout the world. And so this manifests itself in many religions and movements, and anything taken to its extreme is always going to be a bad thing. And so for me, my hope was always to say, this is not making a statement on Rastafari. This is me telling you a story about a young girl in Jamaica and her struggles with her father, who is a man who also had struggles with his own family and his own identity, and those manifested in particular ways. So I want the story to be the story of my family that just so happens to be Rastafari, but also a nuanced one about Rastafari. And ultimately a portrait of Jamaican womanhood and girlhood, and to give a sense of Rastafari that focuses on the women, because Rasta itself is such a male-centered religion. I think most people in the world kind of, when they think of Rastafari, they think of the men. And so for me, it's important to expand the view of Rastafari as well in all these different ways. But I meet so many women around the world who have grown up Mormon, who've grown up Jewish, who've grown up Christian, who've grown up Muslim, and they've said, I relate.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much universality in all of your work, and you have a beautiful line in your book that says, referencing your parents, while he warned us of Babylon, she showed us Zion. Such a beautiful capture in a religion that might center the man, how you centered your mother. It's really, really beautiful. Lina, you have written so powerfully both about women and feminism, and also about Palestine. So I want to just come back again to your roots, because there was a line from your book. Let me just pull it up so I say it correctly. From Become Palestine, that you talk eventually, and I'm pulling a quote out. So please correct me if I misplace it. That your identity became a thick scar that eventually you wanted to show off. There was something about being Palestinian and having that heritage.
This wouldn't be the first time.
Free Palestine.
Yeah, Free Palestine. Yes, yes. So I grew up in a family of, I am half Palestinian, so to speak, right? But the Palestinians who are a very, very large community, the largest community of Palestinians actually outside of the Arab world are in Chile. It's a very large community, but it's also a very integrated and even I would say assimilated community. What is happening? So in my family, because they were Christians, the Arab language was lost. The Muslim community tended to retain the language because they kept on praying in Arabic. But for Christians, that was not the case. So also the pressures of assimilation, this is very colonial, right? This is part of the colonial mindset. They were forced to assimilate and turn into regular Chileans. So I grew up like that. So I knew I had a Palestinian side of my family, but I never thought about it. And somebody was saying the other day that, or in some panel, that I think it was he had realized he was a black, was it you? A black man outside? No.
I'm right here.
Yeah, right. Sorry. I am just really confused now. Anyway, but that you had realized you were black when you left.
Yeah.
Okay, so I realized I was Palestinian when I left because it was a comfortable situation in Chile, but it wasn't a comfortable situation when I arrived to the United States and 9/11 happened. And I thought, oh, I'm not only a Latin American, I also carry a Palestinian name and a Palestinian last name. And that's when the red lights went off. And I started thinking about the scar that I was kind of hiding because it wasn't very convenient. But then I went to, for reasons that are told in my book, Becoming Palestine, which has been translated into English but not published in English. When I traveled to my grandfather's birthplace, which was Beit Jala, which is in the so-called West Bank, Palestine. When I went there, I was very much made aware that I was Palestinian. I was mistreated in the airport. I was interrogated for a few hours. Everything was taken away from me. So I actually eventually got on the plane with my passport in my hand as the only thing I had. And on top of that, the police came back into the airplane, took my passport away, and the motors were running, and I was like, the entire plane was waiting for them to come back with my passport. That's when I started writing my book. And I think that is what eventually turned me into a Palestinian. In Spanish, the title is Volverse Palestina, which is a super beautiful word because the verb in English would be, the same verb goes for to return and to become. So that trip back to Palestine made me return and become Palestinian. And it is in the process of crossing the border that I suddenly felt that there was something in me that made me recognizable for the Israeli police, and that I actually wanted to show it off. And I knew that that was my political awareness of what it actually meant to be a member of the Palestinian community in the diaspora in the world, meaning outside of Chile. This does not necessarily have so much to do with my mother, although I have to say that it was my mother who, for many years, tried to convince my father, my non-Palestinian mother trying to convince my Palestinian father to return to his father's birthplace. And he wouldn't do it because he felt angered by the situation. He didn't want to knock the door of his home and find settlers and all of these things, right? But what was very beautiful to me is that I eventually was able to somehow convince my dad of going back, of returning, because he read my book. And when he read my book, he decided to make a trip with my mother, who was very happy right? And visit the family, visit the land, and sort of, and you know, connect that identity. And I think that that has been, if anything, I mean, the most important book that I've written, and my connection to my dad has been strengthened, but also with the rest of my family, thanks to that book and to that experience. So I'm very grateful to my Palestinianness for what it has done for me.
Thank you for that. Your mention of your father is a great segue for us to come back to Nick and your work. You write, you know, so many of our conversation today, even, it centers the mother, and I think rightfully so. And your place on this conversation, this panel, is also critical because you offer us in your work an opportunity for men to be present and more present, specifically in their role as fathers, and to speak to that. And so, why do you think there has been, maybe, particularly, let's bring it just home to Africa and East Africa and even Uganda, Kenya? You were saying earlier that your mom lives here in Nairobi. Why do you think our literature and the African voice has maybe not given men as many opportunities? Why have we shied away from the emotions? I know some of the answers might be obvious, but I'd love for you just to tell us your thoughts on that, and maybe why for you have intentionally brought that as a theme more than once, more than twice in your work.
I hope I do this justice. I don't know. It's something I grapple with. I noticed that in both my parents, eliciting emotion from them is hard work. And I think when I was growing up, because I moved around the world, obviously, because I had to leave Uganda, but also because I lived in Kenya for a while. I lived in Saudi Arabia. I've lived in the UK. So oftentimes I was living in different worlds, totally different social classes, different personalities. So I had to learn not just myself, but other people quite quickly. And I had to learn how to connect quickly. And I don't know what it is about the African culture. Maybe we have a natural pride, or we feel that things happen a certain way. I don't want to read too much into that, but I know that I made a decision when I was younger. I don't know if I'm succeeding because I'm a father now, and I'm a husband, I'm a man. I've been a man most of my life. But, yeah, it's true. But one of the promises I wanted to make was that I would release my emotion, because oftentimes I had to hold my emotion as an othered body, the black body, a colored body moving through the world. You never get to fully express yourself. Just as you return back to your homeland, you were talking about that, Lina, you know, you're fully Palestinian, but you're made to feel as if you've done something wrong coming back to your homeland. And that is an experience that I've had, you know, sometimes coming back to Uganda, sometimes even coming back here to Kenya. Sometimes I'm made to feel othered. Yet this is where I feel most at home, but my accent will give me away, the way I dress will give me away when I go back the other way. And so one of the things I realized with both my children is I wanted them to, regardless of my failings, because you can never be a perfect parent all the time, that I wanted to show them that I love them and that my emotions about them were real. Because I think we live in a world where we assume, and this is the only point I will make an assertion, I think African parents assume that we should know that they love us. And they do not think that we need a distilling of that love in some kind of action, conversation, reassurance, becoming, because that's how we become you don't just go to a plant, grow, and it grows. I mean, that's God's job, but it actually needs nurturing. And I think we just assume from the African, well, I gave you school fees, I was there is the love. And if you can't see it, you're an idiot. You know, whereas the reality is we need that tenderness, that intimacy, or at least I do, and I had to admit that to myself. Otherwise, you're just a bottle of confusion and a bottle of rage. And they're going through enough, especially in this digital world where the world is actually lying to them most of the time. So if the world is lying to them most of the time, and then you are not even showing them that they matter, you're actually part of the chaos building machine. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yes. So.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if she. I used to it's just a small thing, but I love you forever. And then I still do it. So I got to do another one with my son, but I try and make him laugh all the time so that they have a memory of their father, this idiot who loves them, right? As a, you know, because sometimes that is the foundation. Like, you know, that is the foundation you want to leave. I'll pass it on, but thank you. Thank you.
Well, I just want to read, I've asked them all to read one of their poems before we close today, but I just want to read back to you something you wrote that I think is so beautiful, and how you are writing a new script. You write in your poem that's many years old, Promise to My Unborn Son, you have this one line that's so lovely. There were no memories to show me how to love you, and I knew a day would come when I would stare back at you without words. But it sounds like you have found the words, Nick. So that's just a beautiful thing to witness and to be a part of this conversation. Yeah, I think that deserves applause. As our time is running out, let me give one more question that I'll ask each of you to respond to in any way that you like, to bring us back to our theme of mothers looming large. Each one of your works pushes against inherited scripts, whether that's faith communities, whether that's racial, political, any other kind of ideology. Inherited scripts about gender, obedience, caregiving, identity. What family myths did each of you feel compelled to challenge in your writing? What was it that if you had to put a finger on it, you were like, this is the thing that I'm chasing, that is at the heart of my writing? And maybe how do each of your cultural lenses further complicate or clarify the place, value, or weight of those myths? So I know that's a big question, and I was trying to simplify the language, but
yeah, girl, you're like, we got 5 minutes, but
I know.
Give us a thesis.
We can extend. I've been told we can extend. You guys look like you're fine. You're hydrated. You're okay. Yeah. Okay. Safiya.
You know, one of the things that was important to me when I was writing the book, the memoir, was thinking about, as you say, inheritance and the past that is handed down, and thinking about what that means as, you know, for a Jamaican family, and, you know, we're living in a sort of a post-colonial world, like how much of the colonial wounds are still present in the way that we interact with each other as people, as sisters, as family. And so in writing the book, this was something that came up often, because there was so much of our past that we did not know in my family. You know, I can only trace my family tree to, on my mother's side, to my grandmother and my great-grandfather. And then on my dad's side, he never knew his dad. So I can only trace my family tree on his side to my grandmother. And so there's so much about the people who made me that I don't know. And so that was one of the things that compelled me to write, to begin writing and to call myself a writer, was this need to document our histories and to tell our stories as something that deserves to be told with the most beautiful language, to shine a light on the people who came before me, to pull them out of the margins, and particularly the women. And in Jamaica and in the Caribbean, the women are the storytellers and the historians. They're the oral historians. They're the folklorists. And so this is what my mother has handed down to me, and her mother, and my aunties, and so on. So all these women, this folklorist tradition was something that I wanted to pay tribute to when I was writing the book, and to write it in a way of an oral folklore. And we're Jamaicans, so, you know, we don't just tell you a story. We say, no, pull up a chair, because we're going to tell you a story. And so it was my hope that I could end some of the cycle of not knowing where we came from, so that whoever comes after me, she's always going to know her family's history. And so that was my strongest compulsion for writing anything that I write.
I love that you wrote it for that 12-year-old girl, and also for the 12-year-old girl that's not yet here. Exactly. Both of them are your audience.
Actually, my niece Catalea, to whom the book is dedicated, She's turning 12 this year.
Oh, fire.
Yeah.
Beautiful. There's some beautiful books out there you should check out who have done the same. I find so many of our African authors are writing historical fiction, different things in order to capture histories that don't exist, that have not been, as you said, they're on the margins and they need to be centered. And one book I'll just shout out, Born at the End of the World by Dana Kamarhatzion, worth you getting, that does exactly that. Brings a story from the margins into the center and centers in particular women in the political movement of this region. So thank you for that.
And
That
we have to
inheritance is
tell.
ours.
We have to tell our own stories.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, so this question is just a very difficult question. It took me like years to figure out what I was really working against or within, and because I'm an old writer. I started early, and maybe I have 15 or 20 books. I mean, there's many books written, and there are many seemingly different themes that I've addressed. But I have figured out eventually that what I have been working with is the notion of normalcy, against the notion of normalcy. I started out by writing about disease. I grew up with a condition, and that condition set me apart. It made me probably look at, it's the same thing, it's connected with the colonial question, because when people are not in the center, when they're not normal, when they're not like acceptable, one starts feeling marginalized, and actually it is, we are marginalized in many ways. So I think that the sort of grappling with the notion of a body that is not the normal body, that is not the perfect body, that is not perhaps the beautiful body or whatever, gives you a sense, and you're always struggling to become that. But becoming that is erasing you. It's actually erasing your difference, is erasing your contribution, is erasing your thinking, your singularity, etc. And so I think that all of my books somehow are dealing with this question, be it disease, be it not being a mother and what that means in the world, not being the perfect mother or not being the perfect child to your mother, and then also being Palestinian. Being Palestinian, at one point I realized, I mean, this is a colonial question. People are being assassinated just because they're not Israelis, right? And because they were there, and because they're indigenous populations, and we have normalized the genocide by not standing up against it. And I'm not pointing any finger. I'm just thinking of how this has happened, that we're not speaking of this more and more as the genocide goes on. So the question of normalizing and normalcy and how that imprints some rationale that is wrong and that is hurting people in many different ways, I think has been the center of my preoccupations.
I appreciate that so much, because you really, in your essay and what I've been able to read in the English, it is very uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to examine what in us we have accepted as the baseline, as the starting point, and I think you constantly ask us, is that normal? Should that be the starting point? Is that where we're all headed? It's an important conversation to have. It's an important question to ask to ourselves. So thank you for that. Nick, your thoughts?
I'm such a man, I've forgotten the question.
I was asking about the myths that may have informed some of your writing, and kind of what were you chasing when there was a theme, a through line?
I'm ready now.
Yes.
I'm ready. I'm back.
Okay, you're back.
All right, so a few things. I think the myth of the African story, as if we are kind of these prehistoric beings. We live inside of the colonial experiment as if it's the truth. We live inside of all of these things. We live as if that is the way we should be, and there is actually another. Well, there are many ways we could be, but and also what it does is it silences us. So I want, as a poet, just for my own self, I just want to master language. But in mastering language, I want a medium that allows us to connect. So in You know, when we read all of these stories, these essays that you've written, Safiya's memoir, you know, it's like when you read them that we connect and we see each other and we appreciate one another and we love. You know, part of the things that you're talking about, the wars going on around the world, is because we're not willing to look at that person and value them as a person. And if you can't value them, and that can be anybody, it could be a person at war, but it could be your mother, your father, your wife, your son, a person of another tribe. And so I want to speak into that silence, and I want us to kind of cross the bridge of connection. You know, sometimes you watch a film and you're by yourself, or you read a book and you're by yourself, and it elicits a tear, or it elicits some joy. That is the human spirit. And a lot of times I think the way that we live our lives deceives us that we do not need that connection. And even though we act as if we're alive, we're passively dying in a kind of performance. So the myth of existence where, yeah, I'm fine, when actually you're not, oh, that irritates me. I'd rather have, I'm trying to spark some kind of connection, even with myself. Like when I'm lying to myself, it is the worst kind of lie. When you're lying to, like you, this is what I was saying to you about God in the other room. You're lying to God and God's looking at you. You think I don't know what you're thinking? Yeah? Or you're lying to your friend, your spouse. It's a nonsense. And I think we have the luxury of being in this medium that demands connection. And I think we should, and even when people say, oh, I don't understand poetry. No, it's the other way around. You're not allowing yourself to engage with something that will open your heart, your mind, your spirit. You know, so the myth of I do not understand, we all don't understand. Like, who here is really a master of anything? We're all tapping in the dark. When you ask somebody out, you don't know what's going to happen. When I walk out of this place, I don't know what's going to go on next. So we pretend this knowledge that we have. We're all just tapping in the dark. But at least let's make a connection.
Thank you.
I got a bit spirited there, but
Fiery. I think fiery was the word we started
Yeah.
with this evening. Thank you for that.
I have one. Yeah, I have one. Safiya, you ready? Should I go?
So just as we close this evening, we've asked them each, Nick and Safiya, to read us a bit of their poetry, just a poem each as we close. Is that okay? You can tarry on a bit longer. Is that all right? And Lina, if you have any short even bit you want to read with us, we'd love to hear something. If you don't have any device with you, I'm sorry. We should have given you ahead of time.
I read this poem on behalf of Lina, because she's under pressure. Yeah, for the people of Palestine. There you go. All right, so this poem is called Flight. It's from the New Carthaginians. It has 3 characters, so if you're wondering, Jean-Michel Basquiat, who's alive in this book, a black Icarus, and myself. I'll leave it at that, and then I'll begin. All right. It's called Flight. 1, flight. There are things that can never be the same, like the history of space. 2 a.m. That's the actual moment when Basquiat and I first meet. In the light of that moment, he begins to talk about doing something other than art. Writing, perhaps? I take his coffee and cup it in one hand as he draws a pair of wings on the back of a napkin. Why wings, I ask? Because the body is an imperfect container. 2, flight. Time is what stops everything happening at once. I remember Icarus, Iverson's 48-point game, the taste of sorrel on a beach, but I've forgotten the fear of flying. Awake from a deep sleep, conscious that I am an animal, a bird on fire, looking for an edge. For the 3rd time in my life, I am scissoring through darkness. The night is thick with everything coming. Swift is the night. Slow is the dark. 3, flight, fleeing. Think of it like this. Amelia, the flight attendant, will want to know if everyone is okay. My face framed in the mirror of an Airbus bathroom lacks courage, a gun in a paper bag, and all things fear you and tremble in your presence. As my life has taught me, we must suffer without this body. I will take this body and hinge it from itself. Keep in mind that this section is translated. 4, flight, between floors and levels. I didn't get to choose the location. 0.0436 degrees north, 32.4418 degrees east, in its darkness, in its hunger. Neither did I choose the ceiling of stars that made me a foreigner that evening, in the same way that the air becomes something else the moment we lean into it. waiting to bear us up as we glide upon it. Then I too am a new thing born of another language. I am both familiar and unfamiliar. 5, flight, a selection of small portions. Now this photo is taken towards the end of the shoot. It is a love movement. If you add captions under the sound of the rain pounding, you can hear my father ask the cameraman, "Will the light displace us?" Stevie Wonder is playing. I'm off camera, and at 3 years old, I already know that they are going to split up. That Ugandan skyline looks completely different now. 6, flight, a far-fetched idea. Who understands the world? The year is 1976. It will be a long summer. Air France Flight 139 will depart from Tel Aviv. So far, no sign of blood. The future, what does it know? We're in the last stages of waiting. A German will ask for the freedom of 40 Palestinians detained in Israel. They are moving to a changed destination, a foreign city that houses the room in which I was born. 7, flight, the tale. Do you know this one? I call it Icarus's theme tune. He flies away like a dream and they cannot find him. Even like a vision of the night, he is chased away. Job, chapter 20, verse 8. Thank you.
Beautiful. I'm going to read a poem or say a poem from my poetry collection, Cannibal. And the book is called Cannibal because of the linguistic history of the word. The word cannibal is the English variant of the Spanish word cannibal, which comes from the word caribal, a reference to the native Carib people whom Columbus thought ate human flesh, and from whom the word Caribbean originates. So by virtue of being Caribbean, all West Indian people like me are already, in a purely linguistic sense, born savage. This is home. Have I forgotten it? Wild conch shell dialect, black apostrophe curled tight on my tongue, or how the Spanish built walls of broken glass to keep me out, but the doctor bird kept chasing and raking me in. This place is your place, wreathed in red sargassum, ancient driftwood nursed on the pensive sea. The ramshackle altar I visited often, packed full with fish skull, bright with lignum vitae plumes. Father, I have asked so many miracles of it, to be patient and forgiving, to be remade for you in some small wonder. And what a joy to still believe in anything. My diction now as straight as my hair, that stranger we've long stopped searching for. But if somehow our half-sunken hearts could answer, I would cup my mouth in warm bowls over the earth and kiss the wet dirt of home. Taste bog mud and one long orange peel for skin. I'd open my ear for sugar cane and long stalks of gungo peas to climb in. I'd swim the sea, still lapsing in its soldered frame, the sea that again and again calls out my name.
Asanteni sana, sana, sana. You have thrilled us this evening with your words, with your work, with your insights. We are better for it Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. And thank you to all of you for staying for the last session of the Nairobi Literature Festival. Asanteni.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think because it's the last session, we can take a few questions. Yes? A couple of questions. You guys feeling okay?
Great.
Awesome.
I don't think they can see the audience at all. I don't know if there's a way to dim the lights just a little bit so they can see, because we can't even see the hands.
Okay.
Can you see? Okay.
Yes, I see one hand there. What's your name, Mom? Anna. Okay, great. Another hand? Help you. Another hand? Just so we can see, we collect our few. Do you see somebody? Could you put your hand up so I can see, kindly? Okay, we're going to start with you, Anna, and then we go to someone else. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Happy Mother's Day, everyone. I have a question for Nick on mythology. Could you tell us some impactful mythology on motherhood and parenting? Because I've read a bit of your book, and it's full of mythology.
Motherhood and parenting, mythology. I don't know if I could tell you about mythology specifically, but one of the things I know that I do, which I don't know if other poets do, is I always question my relationship to the people I love while I'm writing the book. Because oftentimes, writing takes you away from the people that you love. Because you have to enter what I call, because I'm a poet, I write other forms of work, but when I'm writing poetry, I'm in the poetry realm. When I'm writing theater, I'm in the theater realm. But I still have to, something that language does is that it reckons with you. So you think you can avoid your life, but when you write, it brings up your life. And so, Marlon James in his Tolkien lectures talks about the importance of myth. And so one of the things I noticed that when I write, it questions every part of my being, my manhood, my pride, my selfishness, and this is what myth is for. Myth isn't just, oh, that's an amazing story. It actually is supposed to question the mental and spiritual psyche and have us deal with difficult subject matter. So even though, like, for example, your book is a memoir, on some level, it's a mythology, right? And even though you're talking your essay about motherhood, it's also, that's why the people are coming around the block, because they're looking at that and thinking, oh, finally somebody has said it. So you have to give language to, even though I might be thinking, oh, I'm just going to write about Uganda. What will come up is the mythology of Uganda. And it will come up through your existence, and you have to allow that to be. So oftentimes, when I'm watching things, I'm looking for like tropes of other mythologies that are sitting inside the work. So for example, in my work, the mythology that's equivalent, which I think I told a few people because you did the masterclass, is that when I was crying in front of the Basquiat paintings, it was similar to when Aeneas is crying in front of the temple of Juno. But that crying is my crying for my people, my country, my identity, my relationship with my mother, which on some levels is fractured, not for anything of her doing, but because she was a single mother living in a colonial system, living in a white space, which meant that she couldn't always be around me. But that crying was bringing up things that ordinarily I wouldn't talk about. So I wouldn't, first time I'm seeing, I only have her on my bookshelf, but first time I'm seeing you. So I wouldn't go up to Safiya and say, hey, by the way, did you know that me and my mother didn't really, because I didn't get, you wouldn't say that. But the book, the mythology of the book, allows that to arise. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Fantastic. Let me get down here so I can see. Do we have another question for any of our panelists? Yes, ma'am. And the lovely mustard. Let me just give you my microphone to make it easier. Here we go.
Thank you so much. First of all, a huge congratulations to the panel. That was so wonderful to sit and listen and sit and listen to that conversation. I think for me, my question is definitely for Saf. Because I think, so you are a recent introduction to my world, and because I was unable to get the book, I ended up listening to the audio version of your book, which to me, I would say to anyone who has a chance to, is experience her book on audio. And I remember when I first started to listen, I was like, oh, her voice is too gentle. I don't think I could do it. And then eventually I was like, oh my goodness, such power in her voice. And whenever you talked about like things, Rastafari, your voice changed. But that's not the question. Here's my question. I'm sorry for rambling.
Fine, girl. All
I
right.
think because I, in many ways, and I'm sure many people have told you, they identify with your story. And I loved your relationship with your mom so much. And I don't know if this is like a question that I'm hoping to, I would ask your mom if I could, so I'm gonna ask you because you're here, is whether there's been, she's ever talked about writing, what her experience has been watching you do this journey. And I ask that because my mom is late. And I'm always like, there are so many similarities between my mom and your mom in many ways. So gentle in the face of, you know, a lot of difficult things. And I always wonder, do they want to write? Are they just happy to bask in the glow of their children and their achievements? Do you talk to her about it?
You know, thank you so much for your lovely words and for your question. I have asked my mom several times about this, and she said, "Oh, no, I'm not a writer. I just gave birth to the greatest writer of all time." And she said, "Oh, my halo is too heavy for my head." So she loves to bask in what her children have done. To her, she calls me her personal poet. I'm her own personal poet. So to her, she has fulfilled her biggest dream. She's a lover of poetry since she was a girl, and then her daughter became a poet who writes poems about her. But I ask her all the time about writing the stories down, even her recipes, right? I'm like, "Mom, I need to get the recipe for this dish or whatever." And I'll ask her, and she's, I don't know if y'all have a similar thing where your mom, the recipe, she just knows it in her mind. So when she tries to write it down, you're reading it, and she said, "Oh, add salt to taste." Or add a little, just how you feel. Add a little dash of it. I'm like, "But how many teaspoons?" And she said, "You just have to feel it, And I think for her, the storytelling is the same. And I think once she knew that I was writing it down, then she tells me the stories. And so that is her own way, I think, of documenting her life and our lives, is to just tell me the story. And she'll tell me these stories over and over and over, and she'll be like, "You remember when you almost drowned and I had to come and save you?" And I say, "Yes, Mom, it's in the book." And then she said, "Oh, do you remember that time when you stepped on that nail and you knew?" I said, "Yes, Mom, it's in the book." And so she tells me the stories over and over. And for me, I recognize that. And I say that is her way of giving me the stories. That is the oral history, the oral folklore. So I just listen. When she starts talking, I'm listening to every single detail. But I'll ask her again. I'll ask her again if she wants to write her story. And she'll just say, "You write the story. You write." My dad has even said to me, "I think you should. I want a memoir too about my life, and I think you can write the story." Now everybody thinks I can write the story, so I'm trying my best.
I love it. Thank you, Shaz. Thank you so much. We definitely would want to hear from your dad's perspective because, we definitely want to hear that. Any other questions? Remember, it's our last session. Anything burning? Anything burning somewhere? Oh, there we go. The lovely lady with the curly hair. Please start with your name so that we know who we're talking to.
Hi, my name is Donica, and I just want to say, Safiya, thank you for writing that story. It's not only for the 12-year-old girls, but it's also for the grown girls who read it. I really appreciate that you said it's a family story first, and then everything else that comes after it, that's the epicenter of it. I think your dad is my dad, your mom is my mom, and I'm Ethiopian Eritrean, worlds and worlds apart, although I related to the Haile Selassie story. If you haven't read it, please do read it. And I had a lot to say about that, but I think that your story is so deep and personal, and I appreciate that you wrote it as a memoir, because we get to, we read it as a book club, and even now I'm getting so emotional about it, but thank you for writing it. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
that's
you.
So beautiful.
I appreciate the comment. Thanks.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Am I missing somebody? As we wrap up, am I missing anyone? Let me stand right here so I can make sure I see. Any last words to any of our panelists? Any questions, any comments? Well, that means this was a fantastic session that everyone has left here feeling, fantastic. All right, guys. Let's give a massive, 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 massive,
Thank you, everybody.
massive round of applause to our amazing panel. I'm just going to ask you all to stand so we can take a beautiful picture of you right here on stage. Become a little bit closer. Okay, please look at the camera. I know the lights are glaring, but his hand is up right there. There we go. Step a little closer, Lina. There we go. Lina Meruane, Dr. Nick Makokha, Safiya Sinclair, Lily Bekele-Piper. Round of applause for them. Makoha, he could be ours. No. Makoha, maniwit. Fantastic. We're going to give you your flowers as well. And you're going to take some pictures with them. Yes. Absolutely lovely. We're going to take another picture with your flowers. If you just look into the camera. I love it. Thank you so much. So Nick's book is sold out. Imagine that. You bought all the books. Isn't that amazing? But Lina's book is there. Safiya's book is there. And if you... Oh, the memoir sold out as well? But the poetry book, okay. So we're going to get something. Lina's books are there as well. We hope. At this point, people are buying them real quick. All right, so make sure you head to the market right after this. They're going to be there, and you're going to be able to sign the books. One last round of applause for our amazing panel as they exit the stage. All right, in a few minutes, we're going to be doing the closing ceremony. We'll be doing the closing ceremony in just a couple of minutes. If you want to be a part of that, just grab yourself a drink, head to the bathroom if you need to. A reminder that the bathroom is through the library into Ikulu Lane. If you need direction, somebody in a pink jacket is going to give you directions. So we'll be back in a few minutes for the closing ceremony.
We wearing as we retire to the southern hemisphere. Jomilambo, mount your horses and get ready. Find your armor, your glig and glow your molue. And now we here, ready or not, you gonna hear us. Wabiro gitonge gokumba wadungremo. Na washika bango mimi nina mpango ya kufanya mambo tukisonga. We're singing songs of freedom to the walls of Jericho. Yeah. Wapiro nyone, wapiro kimaino, nyone, watanja kawana, nyone, wapiro kimaino, wano wapiro, ayo. Wapiro kimaino, wano wapiro. Wapiro kimaino, ero wadonjo chinene. Wapiro kimaino.
Ngamodong to chiangongo, ayaye chiangongo. Ngamodong to loro mudo, nengano loro mudo. Ngamodong to chiangongo, ayaye chiangongo. Ngamodong to loro mudo, nengano loro mudo. Obonya chogolanda magere gigori kogalo.
Nagi manene,
Toyamo mora winjo wacho pinyi pokondie kochamo.
geno puniche.
Obonya chogolanda magere gigori kogalo.
Nagi manene.
Toyamo mora winjo wacho pinyi pokondie kochamo.